I do have a brief aside that's kind of fun. I'm up to 4 Panasonic cameras.
Tell me what.
So I already had the S5 Mark II-X. That was the one that was the backup that allowed me to get the 2 flagships, right? The S1R Mark II and the S1 Mark II. I ended up picking up a S9, which is the same processor and everything out of the S5 Mark II-X, just because I got one at a good price. And so it's not one that would be a normal use case, but it gives me an extra camera body capable of 6K open gate if I needed to try to set up another camera, or if I had a problem with one of the others. It was just kind of one of those, the circumstances fit. And so it's like, all right, well, screw it. This is a very compact body, and it gives me the same sensor as the other one. Sure, I'll add that just to be able to slip it in the bag and have a backup. So just kind of funny that I've added yet another.
Yeah.
But it is a nice camera. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. I was going to say OpenGate 6K. That sounds like a massive sensor.
I think the effective megapixel size is 24 on that one, which is misleading. You know, anybody.
Right. I was going to say megapixels are.
It's a bad way of measuring things, but it's an older version of the partially stacked sensor that's in the S1 Mark II, which I know doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I think that one is also roughly the same, like 24 megapixel spec. And the only reason I use that as a comparison is that would be 4 years, 3 years. I don't remember when each one of these was released, but either way, 2 to 3 years of sensor improvements with effective megapixel size being the same, and there being a somewhat noticeable difference. But all 3 of those cameras are capable of OpenGate 6K. It's just different frame rates that they're capable of achieving for the most part. Like there are some other things too, like the autofocus system in the newer cameras is obviously better than the autofocus system in the older ones. You know, there are other improvements over time that you would expect, but for the like general spec thing with the sensors, effectively the main difference is better low light performance and then enabling better focusing, especially with regard to tracking. And those are things that aren't hugely important to me for the purposes of the backup cameras. For the primary cameras, hugely important, which is why I went with those 2. But for having the ability to add or have up to 4 cameras with the same lens system record something if I needed to suddenly do so, or just had a problem with one of my other cameras and needed to get, something quick set up. I have multiple versions of that at my disposal now.
That's it's now time to release something with multi-angle.
Well, I did do 2 camera setup for the most recent episode of Renegade Noble.
I'm always a show behind. When it releases on the last Friday of the month, then the first Tuesday of the month we record, and then by the sometime after that recording is when I end up getting to watch that video. And it's not like it's there are times where it's like, oh, I want to set us, and then the time where it's like, oh, this is the time to do it, I don't do it because it wasn't at front of mind. And so, but by the time after the recording, after that release, I'm like, oh, okay. But I only have like an N of 3.
Yeah. And I think I finally figured out my set design that I'm going to go with. I ordered a bar stool and a counter height bar stool and a counter height or bar stool height director's chair. And so those will be interchangeable, but that'll finally,
nice.
That will be what I end up recording those in instead of playing with different other setups. And the last episode was yet a different setup that I was playing with just to see.
Well, I'll be able to talk about it in depth on our next recording, because that's my schedule somehow. my unintended schedule.
You know, I am releasing them monthly at the moment, so you have a 30-day window, roughly. So I've seen variations suggesting this kind of thing. I haven't caught this article, or I haven't seen this article, and I haven't read through it yet, but I've seen enough suggestions to make me question if there's not a playbook related to this. I'll let you introduce the article.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so this article it was published by LGBTQ Nation. And it's a commentary entitled "Everything Donald Trump is Doing Makes Sense If He's Dying." And I liked, because I've seen a number of qualified healthcare professionals or people who are stating they're qualified healthcare professionals, and I don't really have a reason not to believe them. It's kind of like if you were at at some place where you mingle or network, and the person you talk to says, "Yes, I am an MD, and I am a psychiatrist, or I'm a psychologist." It's like you're not looking at their actual degree, and you're not looking at some sort of metric where they, they're not showing you their board certification if they have one, because you don't have to be board certified. But point being is, I've seen a number of qualified medical professionals stating, here are things as a clinician that indicate he is sick and potentially not going to live for, to the end of his term, based on certain things, and it's all speculation, but it's not just a wet finger in the air, but it's
qualified opinions.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyway, I like this article because it went in a different direction, but it was logic. It was more logic, and not a qualified clinician saying, "Oh, because of the ankle swelling or the skin discoloration," or I can't remember any of the other symptoms that he has, but it talks more along the lines. It feels like the article felt like good investigative journalism, where the author has spoken to somebody who is qualified and put certain things together. So I think one of the they talk about his health was clearly failing because he's struggling with stairs, and he's now having semi-annual physicals instead of annual physicals, as one in good health tends to have. And some of his routine checkups include, it included, they mentioned it included an MRI, which is atypical for a routine checkup for a healthy person. So he's also had cognitive tests and so forth. So it's taken all of this. They're taking all of this data, all these data points and the facts, and saying this sort of this points in this direction. And they talk about how he's mentioned a number of times where he's focused on the idea that he's not going to heaven, and he's made some wild attempts to win a Nobel Peace Prize, and he's destroyed the East Wing of the White House, because that will be his legacy. That will ensure it'll ensure a legacy, whether it's a positive one or a negative one. That's I don't think that remains to be seen, but at least perhaps in his mind, he's thinking, here's this great thing that I did. I raised money to create a ballroom. So, but it was an interesting take on the idea that he may not be able to serve his full term.
So you mentioned all of the different other pieces that have been pointed to, with the exception of one. There was and this could be conspiracy theory land as well, but there was picture that appeared to be some sort of device underneath the suit, just
I
based
have heard
on
about this. Yeah.
location and rough size and everything else. And so there's some speculation that that could also be a medical device of some sort. Um, Realistically, you can just look at the guy and you can tell that he's not in great health, just like you could look at any senior citizen who is in the decline stages of later life. Now, whether that's, you know, 2 years, 6 years, 20 years, who knows? I'm certainly not qualified to make that type of estimate, but it's very clear if you go back to uh, previous imagery and behavior and everything else early on, let's just say during the first presidency and compare it to now, he very much it has declined and is in the process of declining further. I think that's undisputable.
I agree.
Now, how bad it is, that is entirely something that is speculation at this point because they refuse to release that information publicly.
Right. And I think this is a similar thing that happened with during the second Reagan administration, or the second Reagan's second term.
I would actually even go to something more recent and say this reminds me a lot of the latter stages of Biden's administration.
Yeah.
I don't think there was an intentional desire to be deceitful as opposed to what I think of the current administration, but I'll admit that I'm biased with regard to the intentions of the two different administrations as well.
Well, to paraphrase John Mulaney, he didn't have, we didn't have to know about, we could be on autopilot. I mean, this is kind of how we got here, but we could be on autopilot. We didn't have to care about politics because it was old and boring. It was the same rubbish year after year after year until 2015 when Trump came on. And I'm just thinking about, he even said he said stupid things then, but it's noticeably different what he's saying today versus then.
Well, it's sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead, because I was going to get to the crux of the article.
Well, I was just going to add in that of the things that I've seen recently include, just for further support on the cognitive decline piece or supporting this hypothesis in general, like there are a number of actions where he seems to not even know what actions he's taking, such as certain pardons and things where it's like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You are wanting this done, and it doesn't make one difference to me and what I anticipate having happen to me in general, kind of thing. Like there's very much that feeling of some of those actions.
That is a brilliant segue into the crux of what this article was, and that was basically that he's running the government. He's running the executive branch of the government with reckless abandon, because he's likely, if you think that you're not going to live to the end of the term, then you can do that because he's not going to experience any consequences on this planet for that. He's going to be, while he's in office, he's not going to be found liable or guilty for any of the criminal activities and civil cases that he has against him, at least for the next 4 years. Potentially something could happen if he lives long enough to survive the midterms, and if we see some sort of change from the electric a year from now, then a year and a few months from now, there could be an entirely new Congress or a significantly different Congress in Washington, and perhaps that could lead to some changes. But if you're thinking that maybe you're not even going to live that long, then yeah, you can, an evil person will do evil.
Yeah, many actions very much have the feel of, I'm not going to have to deal with the repercussions. Or it's going to take so long to get to the point of dealing with repercussions that it's not going to matter one way or another for me personally, type thing.
Right. It's the time, his expiration date will occur before any of the consequences land on him. So that's that's kind of, it fits. Whether or not it's true or not, we won't know. Time will tell. But it's certainly a narrative that's not difficult to accept.
And realistically, so maybe also decent just addendum. Today, as we record, there are some significant elections that are either still taking place and wrapping up or have wrapped up. And for the most part, you couldn't have asked for a better set of results for the Democratic Party thus far. And that includes, is it Zoran? Is that how you pronounce his first name?
I think it's Zoran Mamdani.
Mamdani. I know Mamdani is the correct pronunciation for his last name. I have not heard his first name pronounced recently enough, so I do apologize if I get it wrong. But he's won the mayorship of New York at this point.
Yes. So excited about that.
Virginia elected the Democratic candidate to be the first woman to serve as governor as well. And I unfortunately
that was always going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, that was not surprising. But New Jersey, New Jersey was the one that was always going to be that case.
Oh, I was going to say there was no way around them having a woman in the governor's mansion, because
the Republican candidate was also
and I thought that's awesome.
Yeah, it took me a moment to catch up, but yes, I agree. And then Spanberger won the
governorship in Virginia.
Okay, and then New Jersey. New Jersey was not much of a surprise, is my understanding. I didn't really pay attention to that race leading up to today. I just caught the highlights. But I know that Trump supported the Republican opposition in New Jersey, and the Democratic, I think it was the incumbent who was a Democrat, won. Either way, New Jersey also elected re-elected or elected a Democratic governor. And then polls are still open in California last time I looked, but they're voting on the Proposition 50 redistricting to counteract Texas's redistricting maneuvers earlier this year. And at least early polls look like that's going to go as expected, with Democratic support as well. And just to kind of overview of why this is important to even mention, I mean, we're not that far into the current administration cycle, and you start to have this kind of movement of public opinion, regardless of how likely it was or how probable it was going into the elections. It's in each of these, the commentary has emphasized greater turnout than expected. And I think that's the key thing to point to, is that people are fed up and frustrated, and rightfully so, and they're taking action in the ways available to them. And if it already happens now, as long as we do not get complacent, or it's not just kind of a short-term knee-jerk reaction, then the midterms could very well also be influential, at which point we could see some pretty significant change, just to kind of bring it all into a bite-sized kind of bullet point.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what happened a year ago, is that after 2020, people got complacent. Well, the midterms in 2022 were sort of somewhat indicative of, if I'm remembering correctly, it was Roe v. Wade was overturned the summer of June or July of 22, and then the midterms, there was some amount of response to that. But in 2024, there were enough voters that didn't vote. So there was enough of a gap between, like, if you look at the entire number of people voting, there were I don't know if the actual data supports this, but the math supports the concept of there were enough voters that just didn't vote, that voted for Biden in 2020, that could have voted in 24 to keep Trump out of office.
Yeah, so that also goes into um, the what would you the protest vote, I guess is a good way to put it. The ones who just didn't vote because of Israel slash Gaza or abortion or whatever topic you want to choose. There were a number of them where there was a subsection of the populace that chose not to vote because they didn't agree with Harris's views. And essentially, that subset of the population is what handed Trump the presidency.
Yeah, so that's yeah, and it's like I'm reminded of a quote from a movie called the movie was called The Boondock Saints, and it's in the opening lines of the movie, and it is there's a priest that is preaching that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And that's exactly how Trump got into the White House again, is because good people did nothing.
I believe that's a reference to Nietzsche.
I know.
I was trying to remember for sure if it was him or if it was someone else, but I think it was him, right?
I don't know who it was, but that's why I can. That's why I can I can definitively quote somebody quoting somebody else. I can quote the character from the Boondock Saints quoting whomever originated the quote. So I'm not sure. I don't like looking at the. I'm looking at the quote now, and it's the AI overview is saying that Edmund Burke is misattributed to this quote often, and I'm not sure who Edmund Burke is. But there have been other people have had expressed the ideas. Somebody named John Stuart Mill and Reverend Charles F. Aked. So I think it's one of those things where it's a pretty common concept. So it's probably not just one person that could have really made it. You'd have to look and see who popularized it, not necessarily who initially stated it, but or at least it's old enough that there's some ambiguity. It's kind of I like to think of it like when people say, well, if the Mayans had pyramids and the Egyptians had pyramids and the Cambodians had pyramids, that certainly indicates that aliens taught us how to build pyramids, and while that is not something that's demonstrably untrue, it's just easier to accept the concept that when people of the same level of intellect have the same problem to solve, we'll come up with the similar solutions.
So interestingly enough, I should have saved the article. There was an article that I saw not too long ago talking about an ancient Egyptian. I assume it was
a sarcophagus.
I assume that it was a mummy, or either way, some remains where they found essentially a screw drilled into the knee in a way that was very similar of modern day orthopedic surgery practices, and they actually had it examined by an orthopedic surgeon who said it was extremely precise for being on par with the results you would expect from modern day surgeries. Like the material chosen was resilient for load bearing, the angle and everything else was appropriate for load bearing in the way it was done, all that kind of
like they had studied it before.
Exactly. And so it's especially in the wake of other pieces of anecdotal evidence like that, it is absolutely easier to accept that certain solutions tend to be common across certain civilizations.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think people today. I don't think that the smartest people today are any smarter than humans were 10,000 years ago. I think the difference is that we have different technology. We have been able to build on technology. And that's the advantage we have. We're not starting as far behind.
Well, there's a reason that you have the cliche about standing on the shoulders of giants. You know,
Yes, yes.
it's the evolution of science is very much building on the work of your predecessors.
I was recently thinking about something similar to this about like, you know, I it's not I think I'm sure multiple times a year I have, I do a deep thinking on how, how do you know a thing? Like, at the beginning of this recording, I was thinking, I was saying, well, I just, if I go to a party where I'm networking and somebody says I do this as my occupation, I just accept that. I don't actually know it, and then if you start to really think about what can you know anything? And really all that you can know is that you can't know something if you want to get really into it. But, we don't live our lives that way. We have to live our lives in such a way where the things that we accept to be true are how we define knowing. And then you've got to also understand it's like, maybe that all of, there's probably there's a portion of the things that I accept to be true that just aren't.
So there are two things that we're going to have to bring into this conversation as a result of this. So one, there was something on social media that you sent that I had seen, but it's a perfect addition to this conversation. How core fundamental psychological truths, one of those being that everything we think, regardless of how objective we feel we could be, is biased. And recognizing that bias is a core component of understanding the world around you at large. That's an interesting anecdote just to add. In support of the idea that we never truly actually know anything, we only know our interpretation of the thing. But then to take it a step further, if you go back to Descartes and think about how you can distill whether you know something into its most simple form, we can't even actually know whether or not we exist, because it's predisposed to certain assumptions in order to accept that we exist. And therefore we can never fully know anything if you want to get to the just root philosophical level. So whether you're talking about psychological science or philosophical exploration, the answer is still the same. We can never fully know anything with our current state of understanding.
Right. I think the things you've got to understand is like the brain is designed to be not necessarily to be comfortable, but to keep us in a place, is to keep us alive and also to keep us in a place where we feel some amount of relative comfort. And I say relative comfort because there are things that we are comfortable with that are markedly not happiness. So, your brain is not made to keep you happy. It is made to keep you alive and in some form of comfort, I think maybe comfort zone, maybe not even comfort might not be the right word.
Well, I think you could just apply the physiological idea of homeostasis to what the mind attempts to achieve, which is some level of equilibrium between comfort and discomfort.
Right, because sometimes the thing that it's like, I guess where I'm getting kind of stuck is that sometimes the evil I know is the comfort, whereas the unknown might maybe significantly better for me, but that's uncomfortable to go into the unknown.
Yeah, I think you could still describe that as some level of equilibrium between comfort and discomfort, because it doesn't say whether you're choosing a particular outcome or anything else. It's just your body navigating how it reacts to both sides.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.
I just didn't get a moment, so this is kind of like the cutting room floor, and that is that whenever it was that Trump tweeted Covfefe, at that point in time, in my head, he was probably drunk, probably on the toilet, and mistyped something and accidentally pushed send. Like that was the narrative I painted in my mind. Whereas now, if he were to tweet Covfefe, I would think, oh, he's just like, his brain is just not working and somebody didn't take his phone away from him.
Or he just had a stroke on the toilet. I mean, he could have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I did have this, after reading the article, I told Becca, I was like, that's like, when he dies, it's like, I want to go buy an American flag so that when he dies, I can fly it at full mast.
You know, so I don't remember which executive order it was, but he issued an executive order talking about how any burning of a flag became punishable in some way. It was a crime, et cetera, et cetera. But burning the flag is protected under free speech as far as the Constitution is concerned. So part of me, and I haven't done it only because there's no reason to seek out being an antagonist at the moment, which is kind of surprising for me, but at the same time, I haven't, but I've very much considered multiple times going and buying a handful of American flags only to show peacefully burning them in as public a fashion as possible. And it's just, why? It doesn't do me any good to do it, other than the whole I reject your authority kind of mindset streak that I know is in my blood. And I don't actually have a reason for that to be a platform. Like what I'm doing with Renegade Noble is more of a properly objective social experiment with regard to providing some level of rational resistance. Like, why would I go burn a flag instead? It's just, it's such a quick and easy, I dare you to arrest me for burning it kind of thing that makes me want to do it. And yeah, I won't, just because there's no real reason for me to, but man, it's so tempting.
I was going to say, it's so easily misunderstood.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, I don't necessarily have any strong love of this country other than the fact that it's the country of my birth. So I'm not by any means the most patriotic person you will encounter, but I also don't hate this country. I think we can do better. I think we should do better. And I think we will do better. It's just, we've hit a pretty massive stumbling block since our inception that we haven't figured out how to clear.
That's true. I would agree with you on all points there. And really, I like to think about, it's like Pete Holmes says, you think you're in America? Zoom out. You're on Earth, And I really think, we've talked about this before, but the concept of nation states is just, it's been outdated for a while. And, there would be such a benefit to us focusing on just being people of this planet instead of, focusing on the arbitrary borders and so forth. So it'll come about one day. System change, as long as we don't create an extinction event that gets us, then the concept of nation states will be one for the history books. For the after show, I do need to make sure that this is I want to make sure this is out here in the world, because I sent this to you. I don't know if you've read it yet, but I sent to you a post that I don't know. Yeah, you did respond to this. I said to you, this is quintessential Jesse Hart energy,
yes.
through and through. And so I know there are going to be people listening to this, and some of these people are going to be related to you, and I just need to make sure that they understand who their father is.
Yeah, I make no secret of this streak. So
right. So I just came across this, and it was a social media post, and somebody said, being an independent contractor sucks for a lot of reasons, but it also affords you the unique ability to tell people to fuck off in delightful ways. And now that you are, now that you've been out on your own, being your own boss, being your own business is it a year and a half now? Or close to?
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to 2 years.
Okay, that's what I thought, because it was early 2024. Was it spring of 2024?
Officially, yes.
Okay.
There's some wiggle room
yeah.
there, because I really didn't do much for my employer at the time for a certain amount of time prior to that as well, where I was doing some things. So yeah, so officially the business was formed in January of 2024.
Gotcha. Okay, that's where you will, the official start. So, anyway, this post is a screenshots of a text message conversation. So, and it starts with we'll say the business side, the corporate side, and it says, "Hi, Caleb." I assume that this independent contractor is Caleb. Hi, Caleb. I was just informed you weren't on the morning stand-up call this morning. How come? And Caleb responds, yeah, dude, I was asleep. I basically never join those. Going forward, morning meetings are a requirement for employment at, redacted company. I expect you to be on the next call tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Man, that sucks for you guys, but I'm not an employee. My contract says nothing about required hours or daily meetings. You really need an attitude adjustment. If you aren't on the next call, you're fired. Your choice. You can fire me if you want, but you guys have to pay me through the 18th of next month regardless, so I'm definitely sleeping in tomorrow. Enjoy your meeting. You guys really ought to read the contracts you have us signed sometime. Pretty wild stuff in there. Please call me. No. That's my favorite part. No.
Yeah, that very much is something that would not be surprising for me to have as well.
No. I mean, it could have started with "Hi, Jesse."
Yeah, actually, I would say that I would be more direct and abrupt, and probably more abrasive than this particular individual was, because I would have just started with no.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, but I had seen that one before as well. But I love it every time I encounter it, because it is very much it's why I wanted to go out on my own in the first place.
Yeah,
because the only person whose reputation I can hurt is mine.
Yeah, and if you and that also makes it so that you're working with the people that you want to be working with, because at the end of the day, there are certain people. It's like, yeah, it's I have enough work available to me, and working for a guy like that is not the person I want to be working for. I want to work for the person who understands that I'm going to come to the meetings that are important to the function that I provide. And I don't need to come to the unimportant meetings, the morning stand-up. Oh, man.